right, everybody, welcome here to show 156. Matthew Mezinskis, your host here from Northeastern Europe, joined by my co-host here, Michel, keto miner from Nodal in Paris. They're relatively new offices, right, Michel? How you doing?
Hey, what's up? Yeah, two weeks old offices.
Nice, congrats. And in a exquisite office/studio with a view, as you can see, dear viewer, if you're watching this feed, we have Henrik Skogstrøm from Norway, founder and CEO of LN Capital. Henrik, thanks a lot for joining and welcome.
Thank you for having me.
You know, undisclosed location perhaps where you are, or people can figure it out?
I think people can figure it out, but yeah, the view seems unreal, even in real life back here. So
I can imagine. So it was great to meet you in Prague during BTC Prague. We actually shared a taxi back to the old town. And I guess I'll just tongue-in-cheek ask you the same question that I asked you before. When I heard LN Capital, you know, how big is your fund? What are you guys raising for?
yeah, I got that a lot.
Tell us a little bit about LN Capital and what you guys are doing.
Yeah, so we're not a VC fund. We don't invest in startups. We're a startup ourselves. And also, it's part of the reason why we're switching name from LN Capital to Torq. So this is, it's been a common problem. But what we do
this is one of the last times you'll be known as coming from LN Capital. Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, we build node management software, but for really large nodes and really large companies. So if they have, they usually have like multiple nodes, they have thousands of channels, and they have thousands and thousands of payments happening every day. At that point, you need a really scalable solution and not just anything you find online. So companies until this point has mostly built stuff their own out of necessity. So we're coming in and providing software they need instead of them having to spend time on that, which their customers don't really care about.
Yeah. So Torq is the software, the platform. You know, big question always these days: open source, closed source, some sort of mixture. How is your setup look?
So right now Torq is closed source, and we have a different project that's not really LN Capital or Torq. That is called Scaling Lightning. We can talk about that as well a bit later. But yeah, we're closed source.
Managing channels, capacity, node management, routing, all of that stuff's, you know, depending on how much in the weeds we want to go, and we can during this episode. But yeah, who exactly is your product for?
So yeah, we're, as I said, for large companies, for example, could be IBEX, for example. Where they have multiple nodes, they have a lot of channels and high volume of payments going on. And at that point, the problem isn't really about having inbound liquidity. It's about managing the sheer chaos it is if you don't have a tool. So this is really hard to do when the volume grows and the number of channels and the amount of activity grows. So typically, a company spends a ton of resources building tools to manage, to see what's going on and be able to prevent something going wrong. So, yeah, we're here to deliver that for them.
And how long have you been working toward building this?
So we started building about 1.5 years ago. And we're now we just launched our version 1, and we're starting to really pick up speed, and the features are really piling on here.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing what everybody's doing. I remember quite well the tension as August 2017 was coming and SegWit was becoming activated. And, you know, the growth exploded originally, I remember. A couple of years ago, it seemed like Lightning... not the development, because that's not my gig, but it almost seemed like there was maybe a little bit of centralization or a little bit of like less active usage of Lightning. And I thought with the kind of price explosion that happened in 2021, there would be even more usage. And I'm certainly a proponent of Lightning. I think it's going to be great. But if anybody who's developing on Lightning right now, to me, it just seems like you're super forward thinking. You definitely can see around corners, because I think a lot of individual Bitcoin users, they're just not not familiar with it. What do you feel about that assessment? Do you think I'm way off the mark there? Are we sort of behind schedule? Are we on schedule? Just sort of big picture with Lightning.
So in my opinion, I think this it's sort of developing in phases. You saw sort of that initial jump and then flat for a while and jumps up in total capacity again.
Yeah.
And I think this is not necessarily something where Bitcoiners need to be super engaged, need to have all that hype around it, because it's a technology that just works. It has a function. So it could be as well that I think most users in the future are not going to know that they're using Lightning. So it's a transport layer. So my hope is that it gets simplified to a very high degree. But of course, it is very important to have that choice. You have that escape hatch. You can always, as easily as possible, run your own Lightning node. So for example, a solution like Breeze, a ton of these other self-custodial or semi-self-custodial solutions that help users stay in control but still have that convenience is super important. I think this just keeps developing, and I think you shouldn't underestimate the sort of these breaking points where the technology reaches these points where it just kicks off, and it's easy enough for everybody to just take off and use Lightning.
We have another one of those good solutions right here. My co-host Keto, I don't know if you want to jump in at this point with what you guys are doing.
Yeah, so we are self-custodying Lightning in the old-fashioned way, meaning like people run the Lightning node on their physical hardware and then remote to it through Zap or Zeus or any other mobile app that they can use, or RTL, web frontend, whatever. I wanted to ask you, like, so you aim like at really large operators, and it seems to me that except probably one, they are all running LND right now. So what implementations are you compatible with?
So we support LND and CLN so far. We're going to add LDK. I think there's a bit more more people using CLN in other parts of the industry. Among consumers, LND is for sure the most common implementation, and they also have the biggest market share in the sort of enterprise segment. But I think we're seeing it sort of shift a bit around, and I think also LDK is going to be a big player in that space.
And what about async?
Yeah, I thought about this the other day. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how many are using that outside of the world provider. Yeah. Okay. So hopefully they see more adoption. I think one of the blockers might be ease of API use and these things. And I think just some of these things, it just needs to land the correct features for wider adoption.
Do you already have some active customers, or it's in testing phase and you're waiting to release the 1.0 version?
We have several customers or users, and like DC is one, Bolts and LM Markets, for example. So we have some of the largest nodes running Torq today.
I didn't actually. LN Markets are based in Paris, like we are, and we co-organize the bit devs in Paris. So yeah, I ask them as well next time we see them. Okay, and so can you maybe run us through the basic functionality of, or maybe you have some demo which we could look at and see how the product looks?
Not sure if I have the demo ready. We can check that out afterwards. I can just go through the features. So yeah, the main thing about Torq is to be able to manage a large number of channels and large amount of activity. So we have all the basic node management features, but it's really geared around having multiple nodes, being able to see the channels from different perspectives. So let's say you have channels between your own nodes, or you have multiple channels with the same peer but from different nodes. So at this point, you need to really be able to see that distinction. And also, when you have 1,000 channels, you need to be able to look at categories of channels. You don't go in and look at every single channel and say, should I close this? Should I not close this? You want to say that, okay, there hasn't been enough activity on this channel for a while. I'm just going to auto close it. So we have that ability for you to create really advanced analytics and tables so you can see what's going on. But we also have a large portion of our application is automation. So workflow automation, which we call it, where you set up a series of events. I could try and pull up a demo here. So as you can see in the screen, we have all the normal node management features. You can open channels, close channels, new payments, create invoices, addresses, etc. But where Torq is really, the perspective of Torq is to enable large operations. So you don't really have one node, you often have multiple nodes. So here you can see that we have 2 demo nodes. We have Alice and Bob. And you can see all the standard information about them. You can also see the status if everything is running as it should be. And you can also see that you can customize what kind of data that the node imports. So you have a very high degree of control. So if we move over to the open channel page, here we really focused on creating a very, very fast response from your server. You run Torq on your own server, so you have complete control. But you can see here 1,000 channels instantly if you want to, right? In the dev environment here, we don't have 1,000 channels, but it should still refresh very, very quickly.
And public and private channels, obviously.
Yeah, everything, because this is data collected from your nodes. This is not public data. This is your operation.
And is everything collected locally, or is there do you have to ping your server as well for some extra info?
So you can, Torq has a connection to mempool space. It has also a server that fills in certain amount of missing data about when the channel opened and closed, etc. But you can also choose to connect your own mempool or your own Bitcoin node in order to get that data. So it's based on the choice. It's your choice, basically.
Okay.
But yeah, so as I said, when you have a really large node and you have thousands of channels, you don't want to look at individual channels. You want to see the different categories of channels. So let's say you want to see all the channels that are drained. So you just click this view. And you can do the same with full. And what these really are is just filters applied and saved. So let's say you can add any type of filter in addition. So you can make this as complicated as you want. It's basically a bit like SQL for those who knows that. And then you can save those views. So if you refresh this again and you go back to the full view, you will see the same filters. So that's part of having the ability to really customize your workflow and how you operate as a business. But more importantly, when you go to, as a large company, you don't want to micromanage and go in and check everything. You want to set up basic rules or rule engine, and unless there's something extraordinary happening, that should basically take care of it. So we created this workflow automation. And a lot of this, or all of this, is actually built from scratch in order to enable that kind of control and having it customized towards Lightning node operations. So the process that you see here is a workflow I created to manage feed. And this works in a way where every 10 minutes, the channels, your channels, are pushed through this first filter, which I define this as regular channels. And that's based on the tags I've given it. So is it a sync or source, or is it new channel earlier than 7 days young or old? And I also have these other filters down here. So if it doesn't filter, matches this criteria, it can go through one of these other filters down here. Now, the top filter goes through another filter, and that's just to have more control over. I can split this again instead of making a lot of these very specific filters. And in the end, this is the action applied. So this is actually a update channel policy, and I just named it depleted channels fee because that's what I'm doing. I'm setting the fee for depleted channels to 500. But really, I can add any type of action, and we're adding more and more of these as we go along. So right now, you can see that we have channel policy, rebalance, add and remove tags, closed channels, open channels, and channel requests. We also have the ability to create HTLC firewall. It's a bit more advanced. Not sure if we should cover that now, but we have a lot of features coming into this automation system. But yeah, I think an important thing to point out there is that if you have closed channel as part of your workflow, you might not want to do that if you're unsure about the filtering. So this is something we heard from some of the users as well, is that they're a bit scared of using this automation because it's so powerful that it can, if you do something wrong, it can have bad consequences. If you close 1,000 channels, that's undesirable. So we have this dry run, and once you click that, you can actually go into the logs here, and you can see what went on, what happened. So this is the exact same workflow that we just looked at, but it's represented in a different way. So you have all the actions that went through here. So you can see that it was a dry run, it was triggered at this time, went through this filter with these criteria. All of these channels matched, none didn't match. And then it went through the filter of source channel, etc. But this list is quite long, and it consists of all of these events. So what we've done is that you can just select one of them. So you can see, okay, which channels went down to the depleted channel fee. And now you can see just those. So all the channels, none of them matched in this filter. And so nothing is input and output. There's no channels, and nothing was really affected. But if it would have been, then this would have been the outcome. So that's some of the features we offer. We have a ton more. We just launched the LSP feature. This is also something we're going to expand on. We have a ton more in the pipeline essentially, but I'm not sure if we have time to go through everything here.
I have one question because it's a feature I would like to have on my nodes, for example, is you mentioned like managing several nodes that have channels to some common third party. Can you also use Torq? Like, I want to make a payment to a destination. I don't care which node it's coming out from. So like kind of a proxy that abstracts all your nodes. Is it something which is coming, or it's something you didn't think about yet?
No, yeah. So we're working on that. So we're working on a common API that makes it possible for you to interact through Torq to do requests down to each of your nodes. And this is something we're still developing. But yeah, absolutely, that's a use case.
Can you just back up a little bit and tell our listeners, viewers, like the difference, for example, between an LSP and just someone who is routing payment channels? Is there a difference?
Yeah, so the definition of LSPs is a bit floating around still, but in the way I define it is an LSP is somebody who, on request and of non-payment, offers liquidity to somebody else. And that's not routing, it's actually opening a channel to somebody else. Yeah, so that's an LSP in my mind. Routing nodes are routing nodes. They have channels everywhere, and they just help payments flow through without any direct interaction with anybody.
How do you think the economy on Lightning will develop compared to, say, the on-chain economy? I know that there are many ways to swiftly move back and forth, with the Lightning Network, looping and so on and so forth, with the main chain. No, let me just leave it there. How do you see the Lightning economy sort of developing versus the main chain?
Yes, it's interesting. I think there are quite different dynamics in those industries. I mean, when you look at just purely the routing industry, I think that's getting more and more intertwined with the LSP services, where big routing nodes have a huge advantage in terms of connectivity to offer higher priced channels, for example. And when it comes to pure routing, you're going to see this trade-off between the return on investment you can get as a routing node by just routing payments and alternative and return on investment like stock market or something. Then, of course, with routing node, you have the benefit that you still own your Bitcoin. You have control of them. But yeah, I think we'll see a balance between different markets in the world, and Lightning routing. When it comes to the rest of the industry in terms of usage, and I think we will see a lot of the big exchanges piling on. We have Binance already announced that they have a Lightning node and that they're adding Lightning support, or they already have Lightning support, I guess. Coinbase also announced the same a while back. We're waiting for them to announce that they support it through their interface. But I think we'll see a ton more exchanges. Payment processors are going to pop up, and the ones we have is going to be bigger. I think we're just seeing the start of this, and towards the next bull run, next year and a half, I think this is going to look quite different than today. I think the change is going to be just exponential.
It really is coming through, I think, on the vision of scaling Bitcoin. Going back to the block size wars, which we're kind of just concluding actually when we started this podcast at the start of 2017. But no one ever thought that you would put all the data on the blockchain. No one ever thought that. And now it's interesting to see, I think, especially in the last year or two, with so many good things happening on Lightning, with protocols like Fedi, and which obviously uses Lightning, but you need to expand the ability to for everyday users, businesses, individuals to have access to Bitcoin. So it definitely all seems like it's coming together quite nicely.
Exactly.
Yeah, but I'm still I'm always curious how people think the base chain will look. I mean, are we just gonna have $50,000 fees at some point? $50,000 equivalent fees. We've already had that in total block per se, but it's just what even on an individual basis, it will become so difficult to transact on the base chain that people have to use Lightning.
Yeah, I think that Lightning is an absolute necessity in order for Bitcoin to work. But there are, for example, Fedi that you mentioned plays really, like, it is becoming, in my mind, more part of Lightning, part of the ecosystem where I talked to Obi the other day, and he explained it really well that most people might not afford to do an on-chain transaction to open a channel. So you can look at those who can as sort of quite the rich people who build a highway between cities. And not going to butcher his explanation of this, but it makes a ton of sense.
He said the same on our show already.
Yeah, exactly.
Bitcoin is the earth, and Lightning is the highways, and Fedi is like the communities, the cities. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think that's just perfect. It's exactly, I think it's a really good way of thinking about the future of this, where you can have this balance of different varying degrees of trustlessness and self-custody, because in my opinion, we got to remember that complete trustlessness and complete self-custody has a cost, and when you don't need it, you can find a balance of it. And like Fedi with smaller communities, especially with NGOs, for example, the trust there is somewhat okay. So we need to find that balance, but we need to have the escape hatch as well. So once it's easy to escape when you need it, that's super important. So it's all a bit about the balance there. So yeah, in my mind, it's not just a tool for political sort of independence and all that, or escaping sort of tyranny of control of money and all that, but it's also about the properties of this technology and as a financial instrument, as a way of paying. It's faster, it's cheaper in every way. So yeah, there's a lot of benefits.
And when we talk about the escape hatch, I think it perhaps is inevitable that escaping might not be done to the main chain. At some point in the future, it may just be to a Lightning balance. Which is a different thing. It is a different level. It's a light. I talk about this a lot in the free banking stuff, which I'm a big fan of. Free banking is a great. When we had societies up in the Nordics, we had them in Scotland and Canada, all around the world. But when we had societies that had a banking system that was independent of a central bank, meaning there wasn't even a central bank existing, they still did fine. The economies did fine. They did well. And if people wanted to escape to a harder, sounder money, they could just take specie, you could take gold or silver. But that often didn't happen in the cases of these free banking systems in Scotland, Canada. They actually, George Selgin, who we had a couple times on the show, like it could be that 95% plus all the time of monetary media was in the form of a deposit, where they preferred the paper, they preferred the checks, which a lot of Bitcoiners actually scoff at. But I think it's funny because I think it's a perfect example of what happens. I mean, people don't like, even 200 years ago, people didn't like the clunky coins in their pocket. They preferred to have this sort of media. And yes, it is a problem of the past financial systems that they have been co-opted. I mean, we have a central bank in the world right now. In every country in the world, there's a central bank. So it's clear that system has in the long run failed. And that's why we need Bitcoin. But I think it's interesting because we are quickly perhaps moving away. This is my question, I guess, is it seems we may be quickly moving away from this sort of original Bitcoin vision where the escape hatch was just getting your coins in a hardware wallet and getting them on chain, where now it might be that the most efficient way or just the easiest way to escape is grabbing a Lightning balance. What do you think about that?
It depends. I mean, if you want to self-custody your funds on Lightning, you still need to be some sort of transaction to you, because the Lightning channel is essentially just a 2 of 2 multisig transaction. So to truly own that, it has to be a transaction to you, but it doesn't mean it has to be a single transaction. There could be one transaction that opens a lot of channels, and that becomes a lot more efficient with Schnorr and Taproot. It also becomes a lot more private. So there's a ton of development here. But yeah, if you want to in some way transact, and perhaps as the years go by, it gets increasingly expensive to transfer that. So if you have that money in some sort of Lightning channel, then it's a bit easier to use it. It's less cold. It's actually sort of a hot wallet at that point. But still, there's trade-offs. But to your point earlier, like, people love convenience. People give up freedom and everything for convenience because they have enough going on in their life. And I think that's why we see a lot of these effects where, like, yeah, you could just grab your gold coins and head over, but you're just like, nah, I'll do it tomorrow. Like, these notes are so convenient. And that's sort of why you sell a lot of those. You lose a lot of those properties. And the other side of that, or same side, I guess, like when it comes to privacy, for example, if we need to design this protocol with all of this in mind, with sort of the human faults in mind. We need to make it as convenient as possible for people to use it correctly. And for privacy, we need to make it impossible to reveal your privacy, your private information. So we can't just say that. Companies, please don't do that. Because at the end of the quarter, somebody's going to say, oh, we need to increase profit. And then they're just going to say, how do you do that? Well, we ask people to upload their information. And somebody can say, hey, no, let's not do that. And they do that 3 quarters in a row. And then some guy's just saying, I pay your salary. We do that, right? And then, so the only way to escape that is to make the protocol in such a way that it's not possible.
When I listen to you guys, I feel like we are bound to repeat the history. Like, we have some small community banks, then it will grow into bigger banks, and then we'll have some Bitcoin central bank, which we custody all the Bitcoin, and people will be just lines in the database of that bank. Aren't you afraid of that? Like, if the fees grow exponentially, and indeed, like, all the transactions will happen on some third or second layer, we'll just reproduce the current system on top of Bitcoin.
Sort of, yeah, it's very possible, essentially. But you can say that we have different tools now to make it a better version of it. We're still molding and shaping this technology, and we're working towards something that's better all the time. But that force of convenience, people just choosing what's convenience, that is very, very real. And just hoping people won't do that isn't enough. We need to build towards where that can't happen. Still, efficiency in trusted systems and in centralized systems is a clear benefit if you look away from sort of all the bad stuff that can happen. So yeah, there's going to be centralization to some degree of these funds. I think Bitcoin at this stage is at the point where it's not going to be enormous amount of centralization where it's just two rich guys sitting on all the Bitcoins. But yeah, for example, in Lightning right now, you have I think it's like 5% of the nodes have 80% of the capacity. And you could say that, oh, that's centralization. But really, it's just how human commerce work. If you're a individual, you don't have $20,000 worth of money in your wallet. But as a large payment processor, you might have millions in cash, not cash, but like bank deposits, right? So of course, the large merchants in Lightning are going to have a lot of the capacity because it makes sense to have it there. But that doesn't mean that other people have it off-chain or in other ways, or that Lightning isn't decentralized enough. Because if one of those merchants goes down, then yeah, the other merchants are still there. And you could say that routing-wise, for example, if large parts of the liquidity disappears, then the other routing nodes are going to earn a absolute enormous amount of money in a short time, which means that, oh, I say like, oh, I got some Bitcoin, let's make a routing node. And then sort of the market self-corrects. And that's where I hinted to a bit earlier that you have this balance between the rate of return or return on routing nodes versus stocks or versus all kinds of other things in the world. So yeah, I think this is quite a good self-healing system we got with Lightning.
Well, then let me follow up to that as well. And also what I asked before about basically how the on-chain world looks like. Because yes, capacity in Bitcoin terms is not very high. It's like 5,000 Bitcoins compared to what the on-chain world looks like. And we are nowhere near, I think, if it does become a problem, the problem that Michel just described. I've done many YouTube videos on this, like even with the ordinal inscription craziness of last month or month and a half ago, whenever it was, 2 months ago, you're still at 95% on a trailing 12-month basis is, in Bitcoin terms or in dollar terms, is new issuance, new coins. Like 5%, 6% is fees, right? And it's never gotten below or more than 15%. The miner revenue being, more than 15% fees. It's always it's highly skewed towards the issuance. Now that will cross at some point. No one knows when that's going to be. But that is a big question that I have as well. I mean, I definitely sympathize with Michel's question. So again, long-winded way of saying kind of asking what I asked before. How do you think the on-chain world will look when, say, I don't know, we have a huge capacity on the Lightning Network and maybe people don't feel like they need to go back on chain? Is it going to be like impossible, or?
You are going to need to close and open channels. And I think...
I just mean from an individual perspective more. Because you could still, as an individual, just buy things with Lightning. I mean, and then you're not closing, right? I mean, you could just buy things with a merchant.
I think the limitations of the block size today make sure that as this grows, there's going to be higher fees. We saw that with just a little bit of ordinal craze, and the fees were just crazy, right? I think this is going to evolve a bit. Frankly, I think that the block reward is too high relative to the usage right now. And I think that's one of the reasons that we have that dynamics. But we just have to wait and see how this develops. This is not an oracle. I think with Lightning, we're going to have a huge growth in efficiency, and I don't think it's going to be a problem for miners that isn't solved in some way, because it's basically economics and how sort of the protocol works. And if we look at a scenario where suddenly miner or like the security in the blocks go down, I don't know, I'm not in the mining space. I suspect there's going to be some changes, but I don't think this is going to be a problem for quite a long time.
Yeah, and also one thing I keep hearing more and more is like the block size will end up evolving one day. Probably not soon, but yeah, that's a possibility, which is not completely closed apparently. Well, I just have one comment about the lightning capacity, and I don't know if you will agree with me, Henrik, or not, but I feel like we shouldn't be looking so much at the total lightning network capacity because it doesn't say anything about the transactions happening in it. For you can keep the same capacity and just having an increasing number of circular transactions. So
Sort of. So I think the capacity right now is a good indication of usage and where it's being used. So you see the capacity bundles up around exchanges, especially wallets and payment processors. And there wouldn't be capacity there if nobody used it on those services, right?
true.
It just doesn't make economical sense. So you could say that it is a proxy in some degree. But yes, the capacity can be used many times over a day. So there isn't a direct relationship. So I think we will also see the efficiency of transactions increase and the use of that capacity increase a lot. So I'm not sure how many Bitcoin we need on the Lightning Network, but I think it's less than people are afraid of right now in order to do transactions. Another point is I talked with Renee a while back, who is working on the problem of payment congestions in Lightning, and this is essentially part of. So, like, the thing that is very often talked about is the number of channels needed to be opened for people to join Lightning in a self-custodial way. And you can calculate essentially how long time it takes to do that. A lot of people forget you can have multiple Lightning channel opens in one transaction. There's a lot of efficiency that it can be much more efficient than people think. But one of the other issues is that when you do Lightning transactions, it takes a little bit of time for that transaction to hop through the route, get confirmation the whole way, and settle. It's a very short amount of time, but it's still some time. But if you push 1 million or 2 million transactions in the same direction all at once in a very short time span, you essentially clog up that capacity. So imagine you have so many transactions going through the same channels that all of that capacity is locked up in pending transactions being settled. You could have then the effect that they block each other. So essentially you try one path that should have worked, it doesn't work, so you try another, and that also locks up for a little while. And you do that and you create basically this traffic congestion, right? And that is something that needs more research. It's not a problem that's going to sink Lightning. There is solutions to it. There is stuff being developed. We don't know the limits really, as far as I know at least. And this is the reason, one of the reasons why I started the Scaling Lightning initiative, which is about building a testing framework for development environment, end-to-end test, researchers doing this sort of work, and also populating and getting sort of growing a bigger Signet network that more Lightning companies, etc., are part of. Because if we don't address these things and we just go around and saying like, Lightning scales forever, it's perfect, we don't have to worry about it, and then suddenly Call of Duty adds payment via Lightning. 3 million people wants to buy the next skin or whatever, right? New gun or something, and then Lightning breaks. That's not good, right? That we can't have that future. If that happens, I think a lot of companies are going to have trouble, because then might take 40 more years until Lightning takes off again. So I think we can withstand quite a lot of traffic and things happening. I think we have a lot more room to grow. The industry can be a lot bigger just with the technology we have today. But I don't want to. I want to test it. I want to push this. I want us to be ready for the billion, not the million, right?
Yeah. And are you, through the tools you are developing and selling, are you collecting any statistics as well for your own use or for the public about this kind of stuff, like the volumes of transactions and so on?
No, so we don't collect any of your data. So you run this on your own system, your own database. So yeah, we don't collect anything about your node, like transaction volumes and these things.
Okay. Can you tell us more about what Scaling Lightning does?
Sure, yeah. So the Scaling Lightning project is completely separate from Melon Capital. It's an open source initiative. We're trying to make that into a cross-industry project. And right now we have support from all the major implementations and many of the companies in the industry we're actively talking with, and we started development. So Max Edwards is currently leading that project and built out the basis of it. He's still working on some of the base components, but we're now at the point where we hope more developers jump in and start contributing to this project. So the thinking around Scaling Lightning is that we want to address a wide set of problems through a very simple components. So we don't want to create a massively complicated, huge system to allow testing of every kind of scenario. What we're doing is that we're using Kubernetes at the core with Helm and Helm files to set up a very flexible solution. So for example, you can spin up any node implementation you want, any version of that, and it comes with a client that speaks with that node. So essentially, you can swap out any part of this, and you can say, I want a network with 3 LND node and 3 CLN node and 1 Bitcoin node to develop with. And each of them have a client connected to them that makes it super simple to say, like, please open a channel from Alice to Bob of 2 million in size. And it just happens. And then we also want a library that imports connection details to these clients, so you can do that programmatically. So at that point, with these components, you can create very efficient scenarios to do end-to-end testing, to do development, etc. But as a researcher, you might want to do something much more crazy. You want to have like one client that just behaves like loop, just drains a lot of capacity, or you want to bombard, like the other scenario I talked about, you want to bombard with 1 million payments through some parts of the network. So then you just spin up another container in that setup with a client that does something else than the standard. So you have this set of very simple components, a node, a client, a library, to create this really powerful set of opportunities. The one part I forgot to mention there is we're also building a random generator with personas, so you can have activity going on while you develop. You can also use this on Signet so that there is some activity always on Signet. So the persona can be, for example, Kraken, who's a huge node and who tries to open channels to most other or get channels open to it. You can have Loop, who then just asks for channels all the time to be open to it. And you can have normal nodes, Alice, Bobs, etc. And we're hoping through the Scaling Lightning project to set up a basis of such a network that constantly tries to mimic the real Lightning network in a smaller scale. Of course, it's not going to be perfect or realistic, completely realistic, but it's going to be something approximating it. That's one of the hopes and goals of the project as well.
And as far as Torq goes, what are your guys' goals, for the next five years or so, as far as what you'd like to achieve?
Yeah, so we're already the most advanced node management and automation system, and we want to keep that way. So we're going to build towards the service providers, the really high enterprise, biggest enterprise in the industry and in the world. And we really want to power the Lightning Network industry. So if you're a Lightning Network company, let's say you're a payment processor, your customers don't care about your node. Like if you say that your customer doesn't choose you as a payment processor because the payment arrives, that's the baseline requirement of being a payment processor. They choose you because the checkout solution is the best. The API is super smooth and easy to use. All these reasons. So why would you, as a Lightning company, spend a ton of time building infrastructure and node management tools when your customers don't care about it, right? You want to spend time building that API super smooth. You want to spend time building checkout solution perfectly. You want customer support. You want all of these other things. So that's where we come in, and we try to fuel these companies to work on what actually customers care about, and not just Bitcoiners. Like we want entire New York here to use Lightning, right? And for that to happen, we need to build what they care about and not nodes. Like it's really fun to geek around on nodes, but yeah, everybody can't do that. So next 5 years, I want entire New York to use Lightning.
I love it. No, but it's interesting. I'm starting to, gain a bit more understanding on your sort of views towards using Lightning, using Bitcoin. You said earlier that, you might not know at some point that you're even using Lightning. I mean, that was a common trope in Bitcoin, 10 years ago. It's like you might not know that you're using Bitcoin. And then you get to this sort of loop of danger, which Keto was mentioning, that like, okay, we don't just want all the banks to be the only people running nodes and the only, validators of transactions. How does it look like in your view then in 5 years when people are quote unquote using Lightning?
So I think 5 years is actually quite a short time. I think 10 years, a lot is happening in 10 years. What's the quote? Like, we underestimate what happens in 10 years and overestimate what happens in 2 years, right? Absolutely the case there as well. But I think a lot of that thinking around everybody's going to use Bitcoin directly might be a bit too optimistic in 5 years. I think we're going to go through a phase where a lot of them use it through other companies. I think having that option makes it so that more and more people do it. And especially when economies are getting challenged, when there's harder times and people need to feel like they need that control. So I don't know. In my opinion, I think convenience is a really powerful force, and there's going to be a development. I think more banks are going to fail, going to have issues, pushing people into self-custody, having their own nodes. But people got to suffer for those changes to happen very often.
Yeah.
Frankly, in my opinion.
And as far as the relationship between, fees on Lightning, which you hope to become a big part of managing for your clients and customers, as I understand, versus what miners do and miner fees. Have you ever thought about the relationship there? Like, I don't know how it might look economically. I mean, I know we can't put numbers on it, but are Lightning fees going to be even bigger than on-chain fees?
I don't know. I think so. It's essentially, I started out focusing on routing nodes, where that was a bigger part of it. Now I'm focusing more on businesses who have that problem of spending a ton of resources on managing nodes, right? But when it comes to the fee in Lightning, to me, it functions differently than miners, because here we have liquidity or capital essentially flowing in and out of the network based on usage. And yeah, I talked about earlier, it reflects back to every other market. Should I invest in this now or should I invest in that? I think one of the differences as well with Lightning is that you don't have to buy a miner and pay that off and sort of have it return, etc. Here it's just like, I have a bunch of money. I can, in 10 minutes, open a channel with it, or buy Bitcoin, open a channel. And that works until like, there doesn't return enough money. Okay, I take it out and I invest in some other stock over there or something. And even there's popping up these Lightning services where you can invest in stocks or whatever, where you sort of just through them do that. So it becomes faster and faster and easier to remove that arbitrage opportunity, and we equalize with versus sort of risk versus reward in Lightning, risk versus reward in other markets. So that's how I envision the fee market to work.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
There's one caveat though. It's the LSPs, and that's back to convenience. People love paying for convenience. So it's like, instead of building up liquidity in other ways, it's just like, give me liquidity, I pay you some extra money. And that sort of becomes sort of the top on top of the other interest sort of return on investment in routing fee.
Yeah, very interesting. And we are very early.
Yeah, sort of. I mean, it moves so fast. I've been in this since January 2019, and at that point, it was hard buying something $5 worth of whatever, right? And now you can spend thousands of dollars on Lightning, and it works. And we're sort of early, but it moves so fast. And I would encourage anybody who wants to work in this industry to start running a node, because you learn so much. And right now, it's still somewhat simple. You can get into it and understand some of the technology. If you're a developer, you understand it quite fast, I think. But also designer, for example, running your own node gives you a completely different perspective. So in 2 years, it might not be that easy to really understand all the terminology and everything that's happening in this technology and industry.
So Keto, are we going to be running Torq on Noddle anytime soon?
Who knows? I mean, I'm very curious to look into it more, because as some of listeners might know, we are running a ton of Lightning nodes and a couple of routing nodes. So yeah, that's definitely something we should look into.
Let's talk.
Very good. But I mean, from a dollar or Bitcoin perspective, just to put to paint the landscape a little bit, if listeners forgot, as I said that before, the trailing 12-month miner revenue, its max has been something like $16 billion if you just look at every day. And again, 5%, max 15% of that is actually fees. So, you do the math there. From that perspective, I do think, as you said, more bank failures, people need to escape. I mean, as you said, there's no known limit to the capacity that can come. So I think it is very exciting.
And also, I mean, fee-wise, there's like this what's called like trigger point, hockey stick moment. Like once you pass a certain amount of traffic, the fees keeps growing for quite a while.
Yeah.
Again, stuff can change very quickly, but yeah.
Bitcoin is $500 billion monetary base, 30 trillion. Apple just became $3 trillion company again. Physical cash is like 9 trillion in the world. So there's just like the numbers are just massive. They're just massive. I just keep thinking about how this would look when we really start to penetrate the market. But I think you put some very interesting perspective on this, because you keep talking about, obviously as a business, you want to focus on the customer and you focus on the end user. So I think that's a very interesting thing to to think about. I want to be sensitive to your time here. Any other thoughts? Anything you think that our listeners and viewers should know?
Run your own node in order to learn if you want to enter this industry. We write a ton of threads on Twitter, Alan_Capital, about this and how sort of Lightning technology works. So if you're interested in that, you can follow us there. If you're a developer in Lightning space, check out Scaling Lightning.
All right, Henrik. Well, I think that's pretty good for us here for the hour. Thanks a lot for joining this morning, your time, and pleasure talking to you. All the best.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you a lot. You have a great tools which will help the community.
Great, thanks.